the legal landscape surrounding NFTs is very, very formative, okay? Um, so, we're flying to an alien planet, we've landed the spaceship, and as we're getting out the doors, you're asking me, what are the concerns, what are the main safety precautions we should take on this new alien planet? And the answer is like, be careful, I guess, right? So we could talk about the dangers of other planets we've visited and the sorts of problems we've seen before, but this one's new.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hopping on the Nil Dow podcast. My name is Michael Shima. Listen, today I have a good friend of mine here on the podcast with us. His name, he's pseudo-anonymous, and his Twitter handle is Hearsay. Hearsay is the co-lead of Punkscape, and he's also an NFT enthusiast and a lawyer from what I've read on his bio. But I'm gonna let him tell us about him. So Hearsay, how's it going, my man? And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you have going on?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here, by the way. Thanks for doing this, Mike. I don't know if you go by Mike or Michael, but
whichever floats your boat.
Okay. So I am a lawyer. I practice in California. I am pseudonymous with this project, but that might change, actually. So we're talking about basically doxing ourselves. And the project is sort of half doxed already. The founder, Jaleel, is fully doxed. We have a couple people on the team that are fully doxed. So we're talking about just sort of making it official.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm still pseudonymous. I go by Hearsay. I was a software engineer for years.
Okay.
And I then went back to law school, and I've been practicing law for about 12 years now. And a lot of my legal work deals with issues of technology and startups and things like that. And more recently, of course, crypto, because everything in technology is about crypto these days in one form or another.
Yeah, and we'll definitely delve into that. But keep going. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. So, and I got involved with the Punkscape project some months back. I am co-lead on that, along with it's a group of about 5 people, and I don't know. That's me, man. I'll tell you whatever you like.
Well, listen, there's a lot to talk about, so let's dive straight into it. So, what is Punkscape exactly? Maybe give us the short, brief version of what it is.
Sure. Punkscape is there's a sort of narrow way of answering that question and a broader way of answering that question. The simple answer is that what Punkscape started as is a collection of 10,000 NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain that are comprised of, each one is a 72 wide by 24 pixel landscape that is sort of loosely inspired by CryptoPunks, in the sense of they don't look like CryptoPunks. There's no punks in them. It is the landscape, the land or space in which maybe CryptoPunks would live. That's how it started. But our group is a group of engineers and software developers and web developers and that sort of thing. And so it sort of has, we have a focus on composability and integrations and things like that are essentially taking that concept of the Punkscape, which was initially conceived of as kind of filling a gap, a thing that didn't really exist, which is an NFT generative collection that targets banners rather than profiles, the profile banner rather than the profile picture.
PFB,
right?
Yeah.
There really wasn't a collection like that before Punkscape.
Yeah.
And there still are not very many. You can count them on your fingers. But Punkscape was really the seminal banner collection. It was the first one to really focus on that. Since then, we've seen several, and some of which have really taken off, which is great. We believe the whole banner space, rising tide rises all ships. Yeah. And also, we're friends with a lot of the other projects. Like, we know the people involved, and we're rooting for them too. So it's a fun space to watch. I happen to believe that the banner as a concept, that banner at the top of a Twitter page, or at the top of a Discord, your Discord Nitro or your Opensea banner, that is, or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's a place that people can really express themselves conceptually. For years we had LinkedIn in the professional world is a place where your profile picture is a photograph of your face, maybe taken by a professional photographer.
Yeah.
But your banner was always yours in a certain sense.
Yeah.
That was your show the stadium of a team you like, or show the, here's my dream vacation spot, or something like that. It was always sort of a land of personal expression. And I think the idea of targeting that space targeting the, that literally that space, that physical space on a website is an interesting way to bridge into traditional social media. That, long term, and these days we don't think of Punkscape so much in terms of Twitter banners or things like that. It's still a big part of what it is, but we obviously are fans of Web3 concepts, and the Web2 entities are. I guess the way that I think of it is that Punkscape is kind of a bridge from the Web2 land over to the Web3 land. We're taking that banner of Web2 land and showing people how you can use that as an NFT space and be introduced potentially to all the wonderful world of Web3.
Awesome. And you guys have some interesting products, tools that you've built, particularly the 27-year gallery. Now, before we did this interview, I did my research, I played around with it. And at first I was like, oh, sick artist. Till later I found out it was actually not a person, it was an AI. Right. So
that just makes the artist sicker. Right?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of tell me about 27-year gallery, the concept, how that came about and all that stuff. Because it was very fascinating. I thought it was just, some dude or some girl, on the computer drawing up some cool art pieces. And I later find out it's not human at all. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So how it came about in the first place is, the initial idea for it was one that was right out of the gate, one of the interesting things about the Punkscape collection, right? So Punkscapes, if you look at the metadata of a Punkscape, you will see that Punkscapes have a date. And they've had that date in their metadata, from mint. Those dates span from February 2nd of 2022 to 10,000 dates later, which is approximately 27 years, okay? And that original idea of let's put a date in the metadata wasn't fully fleshed out when it was done. The original idea was like, it's a thing we can build on, Yeah. We can do something with it. Not every piece of metadata has to directly reflect in the token immediately. Maybe we can come up with a meaning for it, that kind of thing. And so that was the original seed that kind of gave rise to, we have to do something with these dates. We had a deadline, right? Because the first date was February 2nd. So something has to happen on February 2nd. And there's one date assigned for each day for those 10,000 days. So what happens on that date was a question, and that our team discussed. And really the concept of Yotukito, which is the name of the AI, right?
Yotukito.
The concept of Yotukito came largely from basically two people on the project, the founder, Jalil, and a guy on the project by the name of Akuti, who'd done work with generative adversarial networks before. So what is it? what happens on the day of Yotukito painting a Punkscape? This is the way we typically think of it. Each Punkscape has a date. On that day, Yotukito, the AI, paints that Punkscape, but it doesn't do it in a fully deterministic manner. It does it with using the Punkscape as the original source material and using a series of basically searching on the web, right? A massive web searching to try to create kind of a GAN of what do words translate into art to try to come up with what does a painting look like. And it takes as input, because each piece is auctioned off live the day of its generation, and each person bidding can submit a bid message to Yotukito while they are, like, during the auction. Wow. And it uses the language in their bid message, which is all on chain, by the way. Their bid happens on chain. That language that is in their bid there is an attempt by Yotukito to interpret the words they're using. The things it knows are in the Punkscape, as in it has knowledge of what traits are in the original Punkscape as well as the imagery. Yeah. And various, die rolls, right? To try to come up with different sort of styles and techniques. A lot of the process of developing it was about blending the influences of these different factors to try to come up with something which is both has a lot of variety to it, but also has a cohesive style. And so, sometimes when you do a bid message, you really see what you wrote having an influence. Sometimes it has less of an effect, and there's a variety of factors that could lead to that. But it's definitely an experience. And when you actually bid on an auction, you get to see Yotikito paint live from your bid. So if you're watching the auction page, when a bid comes in, you will see, the generations, the frames as it's going and editing the work to come up until it does 200 frames for each bid, basically. And then the final winner of the auction gets to choose from any of the pieces that were generated that day. So they don't have to take the one that was generated based on their bid. They can choose at the end. And the selection is not just which bid are they choosing from, like which one was created, but even which frame. So 200 frames per bid, that means that the final winner often, if there's 10 bids, they have a choice of 2,000 of separate frames to mint.
Yeah. From
which all the others are then discarded, essentially. Not deleted. We still have the file. We could do something with it. But conceptually, those get thrown away. And the final one is minted, and it's rendered in a higher definition than kind of the frames that led up to it.
So very, I noticed, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but a theme of Punkscape seems to be, being super hyper customizable, right? Whether it be, your scape generator, which, we'll talk about in a bit, or even just you telling me the fact that me as a bidder can input a message and that can somehow, change the art. So that's super interesting. Now, how important is that to Punkscape's ethos, right? Like, do you think it's super important for, NFT projects to embrace this, like, hyper customization? I don't even know what the word is, but I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
Hyper customization. That's a great word.
So is that super important to Punkscape's ethos to allow people to be able to take part in the creation process?
I certainly don't think every NFT project has to have this focus.
Yeah.
There's all different ways for NFT projects to be interesting and to create, and it doesn't have to be about the it doesn't have to be about the particular things that Punkscape as a collection focuses on. But I do think that Punkscape as a project is very, very interested in the relationship between the holder and the piece. Let me put it that way. That's an important relationship. And the way, in my mind, that's always an important relationship, right? It's not new to art to care about the viewer and their relationship to the piece. I mean, that was like what modern art in the 20th century got consumed with as a topic, right? But so that's not a new concept, but I think NFTs and crypto make for interactions that just weren't possible before. Yeah. And to some extent, it's just about playing with that experience, right? Playing with the relationship between the art and the user. That's just something that we're interested in. If you ask how important is it to Punkscape, in my mind, I think of there as being kind of 4 pillars that Punkscape focuses on, if you will.
Yeah.
Not all of which we've really developed in the way that we want to. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you're seeing, the stuff that we have gotten out the door, but not the stuff we're working on. But in my mind, there's sort of 4 categories. There's the art, right? Which, of course, Yotikito has a lot of focus on that direction.
That's his or her main job, yes.
Yeah, I keep calling it that. Technically, that collection is called 27-Year Scapes. That's the name of the collection.
27-Year Scapes, okay.
Because they will be minting for 27 years, which is, people talk about wanting a quick mint. We're going for the ultimate in slow mint, right? This is the slowest mint we could come up with.
27 years.
Will not be completed. And it's really fun. In the community, you see people talking about, like, mine's going to be in 2 years, mine is going to mint,
Yeah.
It's just really, it's fun to see that dynamic. So anyway, 4 pillars, right? One is the art. One is, I guess, what I would call interoperability.
Yeah.
And meaning more broadly, we may talk about ENS, we may talk about some other concepts here that tie in. One is gamification and metaverse.
Yeah.
And the 4th one is charity, right? How to give back. Although we don't necessarily mean charity in the sense of general public works, but giving back specifically to the NFT space. So one of the things that's very important to our project, very important to our founder, is the idea of developing tools that help the NFT marketplace as a whole advance. And we have a couple initiatives that are coming that are really focused on that angle, because Again, like I said earlier, right? Rising tide raises all ships, right? If we see a fundamental problem in the NFT marketplace that there are creative solutions that might benefit not just us, but any NFT project, looking for ways that we can, create open source tools, things like that allow for a more safe market, a more flexible market, things like that. It's just very important to us. So anyway, those are kind of the four categories.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that last part, right? I guess it's the main ethos. Web3 was kind of founded on the crypto market in general. Let's make everything open and make it the best experience for everyone as possible. You did mention the ENS. And I know you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong. It's called a vibe card, I believe, kind of a Web3 version of a business card. So, I checked it out. Very cool. Kind of tell me a little bit about that, and what are some other applications, if you're okay with sharing, that you guys are developing right now?
Yeah, so what you're seeing now, there already is, for example, if you go to punkscape.xyz, it's a little bit buried because you're really seeing an early draft of something rather than a final product. Yeah. But even now, see if I can pull it up or if that'll just distract me. You can view like I have an ENS generated account page for Hearsay, for example. My Hearsay ENS page at Punkscape, first of all, I have the ENS domain hearsay.eth is why I have a Hearsay domain. Not because Punkscape has given me that, but because I have the token for a Hearsay ENS.
Yes.
Point one. Point number two, on ENS, you can enter metadata associated with your ENS address. So for example, you can have your Twitter account, you can have your GitHub account, you can have a description, you can have things like that. And on the ENS page on Punkscape, it'll pull all that information from the ENS data to give a page that is like a profile page built out of the ENS.
Wow.
Why is this interesting to me as a general? So I'm just giving you what currently you see on the site, not what's coming, okay? But that alone is already sort of interesting. If you think about it from a Web 2 perspective or Web 1 perspective, we're not new to the idea of websites having like create a profile page and fill in information. I mean, MySpace and, was doing this years ago. Friendster before MySpace, right, was doing this. So that concept isn't conceptually new. What is new is the notion that we shouldn't have to do this and enter this information with each service and then have a battle of whose profiles are, who is the winner, the more important social network. Yeah. What's more interesting is the idea that you put this information in one central place associated with one central account, a wallet or an ENS address, and you're not giving permission. In other words, I don't have to give my Twitter account, my email address, this kind of information to Punkscape for it to generate this page. It's doing it out of information that I'm sharing because I have chosen to disclose that information as part of this ENS account. And I think that model is part of growing digital identity with ENS generally. That's a concept we generally believe in. Sign in with Ethereum is a concept we believe in that solves a lot of critical infrastructure failings of Web 2. In my opinion. Passwords are a nightmare in Web 2.
Terrible. Oh, terrible.
Because what everybody does, they use the same password everywhere, or they
add a few numbers at the end.
Or worse, they've got a scrap of paper on their desk, or something like that. So that's a terrible, terrible system. And signing with Ethereum does a brilliant job of not only solving that, but then tying it into an identity through ENS, so your sign-in can be friendly instead of ugly looking, and then once you're logged in, you can have a login that reflects what you want it to reflect, including, for example, a banner. You can set a header file. You can set a Punkscape as the banner that you want associated with your account. And this isn't a Punkscape innovation. This is really an ENS innovation we're talking about. But people aren't using it to the extent that's possible yet.
Yeah.
And it's awkward to use. We're actually there's ways of the what's required to set it up requires a little bit of a little bit of headache. If you've tried to set this information up for yourself with an ENS address, you will definitely get the sense that this is less friendly than it could be.
100%.
And so ways of making that experience more fluid and friendly and building off of it to show how you can create a site with a login and a social network where you're not registering that information with us, right? That's not the directional flow. Instead, it is a trustless choose once in one place and not with us, and build off of that. I think that's kind of exciting as a concept. And so we really want to be sort of in the lead in terms of using it, you know, and showing off how it can work. Even the crypto social networks that have popped up, and there are some, are still typically not adopting this model. I am still seeing social network type crypto projects where the first thing they want you to do is like start filling in information with them, not on chain, and not, you know, and it's like, you guys are missing it. That's not the way it should work. You should already know my information that I've chosen to disclose. You know?
Yeah, that's a very interesting model. I've never really thought of it like that. So have ENS kind of be the central place where people share the information they're willing to share, and let different products, projects, whatever you want to call them, pull data from that, because it's information I was willing to share, whether it be my GitHub link, whether it be my Twitter account, and then present it nicely in one unique page. I really like that as a concept. Never really thought of that. And you know,
and I think just to one point, some people hearing that might be reacting like, well, I don't want to share that information, right? And the privacy is just as much a part of this, because the problem with the traditional model of fill out this form and give us the information to make the page here in order to participate in this experience of whatever service we are. The problem with that model is it's inherently a less private model. The benefit of pulling from an ENS type approach is that, number one, you're choosing what information you share. You're also choosing what information you don't share. And it's not the particular service that gets to sort of give you the form, the questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe they're good, and maybe they don't, you know, are happy to let every single thing on there be optional, or maybe they're not, but they're still asking the question. You're still going through that experience traditionally. And so it is just as much supportive of a privacy model to say, share what you want to. And this allows you to have cohesive identity, to know that you're dealing with the same person across services, you know? So that if multiple things in Web3 utilize the same approach, I know, you know that the hearsay you're dealing with on one place is the same hearsay you're dealing with on another, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think the difference is, you know, having the choice whether you want to share or not, right? So my next question is, you know, at NIL, one of our core beliefs is behind every NFT project, sorry, English is just slipping today, there's a community. And I realized behind Punkscape, there's a very vibrant, excited community. How has it been building that community, and kind of what are some advice you would share to new NFT creators or new people who, you know, want to get into the NFT space and kind of build their tribe? Because, you know, I joined the Punkscape Discord, and, you know, people love it, are excited. Even the person who recommended I bring you on, like, they DM'd me and was like, "Thank you so much, man. I'm super excited. I love it." Yeah, you know, they were very excited, right? So how has it been? How have you guys been able to build that excitement up, and what is some advice maybe you'd share with, you know, other NFT creators?
So every community is different, or should be, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I don't necessarily think what works for us is what works for others, and vice versa. We have a certain personality as a community, in my opinion. And that has allowed for it to function as kind of a home base on Discord. You know, Discord kind of, if you're like most of everybody in the NFT space, your Discord is a mess, right? You've got like 100 different channels.
Oh my goodness.
You've got all of them announcing, you know, like announcements about who knows what. And then when you go in, you know, how often have you seen Discords where it's like, when moon?
Yeah, 100%. I'm one of those guys sometimes.
So how much energy do you have to devote to keeping track of 100 different Discords? And then on top of everything else, even the announcements are tough to like know what to care about. Different Discords use them to varying extents. And of course, you've got to deal with all the security flaws and people hacking Discords, and so fake announcements and things like that. So our Discord has always had a couple of concepts, I think, going for it that have kept it a nice vibe, right?
Yeah.
One of them is we we don't go crazy on the price talk. It happens. We're human. We like talking about price, but it is not the focus of conversation generally. It's not like you're in trouble if you bring up price, but it just isn't the focus of conversation. The focus is actually of conversation is conversation to the extent possible, right? We're not purists about talking about other projects, meaning we're perfectly fine for people to talk about other projects. But there's a difference between like somebody who wants to come in and spam an advertisement for another project versus, sometimes we'll have somebody come in and be like, where is the shill channel? We don't have a shill channel. And they're like, okay, well, I'm here to like market this thing. Where can I post it? And the response from the community is usually like, well, you can tell us about it. Like, we don't want to see your copy pasta advertisement, but if you want to tell us what the project is about, then we're interested. And when people do, sometimes they don't like that. They're like, no, I'm just looking for a place to copy and paste this,
Yeah. Yeah.
But when they do, it really has a way of driving, people. We've invested, our community members have invested in lots of projects just because somebody came around to chat with them about it and answer questions. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm interested,
Yeah.
Now that I understand where you guys are coming from, what you're doing, et cetera. So, how do we drive that ethos? I think that's just, it was probably set in the first place by the founder. That was his tone. It's kind of Jalil's tone. He's not there to he's never been a
Wen Moon guy.
Moon guy. He's just not a Wen Moon guy. Like if you want to get him really excited and shouting and whatnot, show him something cool technologically. Like that's what he reacts to. It's not price typically with him.
Yeah.
And that sort of set the tone. Oh, another thing I think that is really important is I've seen in communities where they really sort of try to shame sellers of the project NFT.
I hate that so much. But please talk on that.
Sure. We very strongly feel your NFT is yours. You buy when you want. You sell when you want. And we're not here to judge you for it. I'm not here to tell you whether or not you should buy a new car or sell a new car either. You know what I mean? Like, That's your life, right? You decide that. And even if I were the manufacturer of that car, it's still not my job to shame you about your financial decisions in your own life. And so I think our whole community very much has that kind of ethos. We like to celebrate when people buy one of our collection. People do celebrate that. Like, we have a Discord bot, for example, that shows when there's sales. It's broken half the time, unfortunately, because it relies on Opensea's API, which is...
we're going to get into that. But keep going.
We can talk about that. We have some ideas. But you'll notice that when it posts that, it doesn't say anything about the seller. It doesn't say anything about... It isn't who sold. It's purely congratulating the new owner. And I think that notion is... I just think that's philosophically important. That was important to me, at least, as terms of our community dynamic, because buying and selling, look, people want to do what they want to do, and it's okay, right?
Yeah.
So those are a couple points. I don't know if those are the most important points in terms of our community dynamic, but they're things
I think you shared it well, right? I think, like you said, Jalil set the tone, right? And you lead by example, right? So 100% agree with you. But let's get into some OpenSea stuff, because in your Twitter bio, it says you're a lawyer, obviously not our lawyer, which needs to be made very clear. So no legal advice is being shared. But, in your experience with the NFT space, from a legal standpoint, what are some hurdles that some projects or some creators kind of need to be careful of, right? Because I don't think any of that gets talked about. And it's interesting to hear from, because you can ask a lawyer who I guess practices law, but probably not really immersed in the NFT space. So you being someone who's very much in the NFT space, but also practices, what are some hurdles that NFT projects need to be aware of or need to look out for?
Well, I guess I would start my answer by saying this is a lot of speculation. And I don't mean that in the financial sense of the word. I mean speculation in the sense of the legal landscape surrounding NFTs is very, very formative, okay? So, we're flying to an alien planet. We've landed the spaceship. And as we're getting out the doors, you're asking me, what are the concerns? What are the main safety precautions we should take on this new alien planet? And the answer is Be careful, I guess, right? It's so we could talk about the dangers of other planets we've visited and the sorts of problems we've seen before, but this one's new. This one is new in a lot of very real senses. Now, there's some obvious issues coming, very, very obvious issues coming down the pipes, and I think some people feel like these aren't concerns because it hasn't happened yet. And in NFT land, a day is a year, right?
Yeah.
But the gears of law grind slowly, and it will come for you too, right? So obviously, taxes are something for every project to think about. Okay, IRS isn't going to go away or ignore the NFT space. So point one, pay your taxes, right? It matters. This is, I'm not saying that from an ethical standpoint. I'm saying that from a practical standpoint. They have 7 years in the United States, for example. It's long statutes of limitation. There's plenty of time for them to catch up with people who have not been paying taxes. And so do yourself a favor. Assume that the IRS, which is, by the way, the largest investor in crypto analytics on the planet right now.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so assume that they're not doing that for no reason, right? And we've seen, for example, people getting caught. We just saw this week some, crypto analytics can do some amazing things, even apparently working backwards through different services that attempt to hide the flow of crypto, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, those aren't as secure as we might have thought. So number one, I guess I would say is I'm not a tax lawyer, by the way. But suffice it to say, I fully believe that the tax man cometh. Okay,
they will get cometh. That's so funny.
Secondly, securities regulation is coming too.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. It's a particularly big one for the NFT space. And I know some people listening to this might immediately react like, we're not a security, okay? Period, right? Damn it. We're so clearly not a security. It's art. How could it be a security? It's art, for Christ's sake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck. So the problem is, why, and this goes to my earlier point, like, well, it hasn't happened yet, so it's probably not a problem, right? I would not subscribe to that logic, okay? The SEC is definitely more focused on DeFi at the moment, but that's only because, like, you should just look at them as having a lag time behind what happens in the market and when they're ready to bring prosecutions and pick their cases and figure out what they want to do. They have not really targeted the NFT space. And they're getting egged on increasingly by the NFT space.
Yeah.
Just taunted by the NFT space. I'll give you just a hypothetical in your mind. If you really, for those who really are thinking like, no, art can't be a security, right? If I were to say I've got a company, I'm going to call it Apple, okay? Just making up a fruit. And I don't want to sell, securities or anything, but what I will sell is pieces of paper that I'm going to call, let's say, like stock certificate, okay? Just a name. And I'm going to give that piece of paper. You can buy one of these pieces of papers. That's not, you don't own my company. It's just art, okay? This is an art that I'm calling a stock certificate. And as a special bonus to people who hold this art, we're going to give you some, some of the share, we'll give you some of the proceeds from the wealth of our company. Like, how far do you think that argument would like, how, that doesn't pass the smell test, right?
It does not.
You get what I'm saying? In other words, don't think you're so clever, okay? That just saying it's art means that you have suddenly trumped like the securities regulation on the planet. It's not going to be so simple. And where you really see this getting egged on is, now I'm not saying projects shouldn't do this, okay? I'm not saying that they shouldn't experiment and innovate and build things, but like the tokenomics of projects are getting increasingly sophisticated and increasingly starting to look like securities, right? So here's some really simple stuff you can do to do yourself a favor, right? Or let me put it this way. Something we do on Punkscape is if you ask a member of our core team, what do you expect the value of the Punkscapes to be in the future? Any form of that question, we give the same answer every time, which is we shrug. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. But do yourself a favor and don't make price predictions. Don't tell people that, don't try to encourage, at least from the project management standpoint, do not make promises about future profitability. Why? Because that's part of the test of whether or not something is a security.
Yeah.
That's not the only factor, but it's certainly one that's one that's entirely within your control. And you don't know the future anyway, so what are you doing making promises about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one thing you can do just if you're an NFT project to help protect yourself is the answer should be the same. We as a project do not make price predictions. Period. That's it. That should be your response. We do not guarantee profitability. We do not guarantee blah, blah, blah. And it, by the way, it doesn't, I'm using the word guarantee, but that doesn't mean that something that falls short of guarantee wouldn't still satisfy this factor, right?
Yeah.
You really don't want to get into any kind of expectation of profit from the standpoint of the person using it. Now, if your community base is talking about expectation of profit and things like that, that's different. They're allowed to have conversations. But there is a different line from when it's coming from the project itself. And it's a simple one that you can, as a rule, try to protect yourself as a project by not playing directly into that factor. I see it like crazy from projects. I think they're just crazy. They're ultimately the SEC and entities, securities regulations in various countries will be going after NFT projects, I suspect. They will probably not be going after all of them. They will probably target bigger ones. But whatever project you're involved in, you probably hope that it is, by that point, one of the really big ones, right?
Yep.
They will, when going after those projects, they will be looking at what cases can they build? Where do they have a stronger case? And don't do them favors by making these factors simpler. My hope is that some common sense changes to the way we regulate securities happens before this sort of litigation happens, because I think a lot of the innovation happening with DAOs and with in the NFT space is super interesting, and it would be a real shame if that innovation was. I don't think it will be stopped, but I think it could be really slowed down and interfered with by certain kinds of litigation. And I don't think it's inherent. I love DAOs. Okay, so I don't think that there's. The argument for why do we need to stop this, to me, seems awfully thin. And you hear people talk about, well, but crypto is so volatile. It's like, so are stocks. Give me a break. Like, so are a lot of things. Okay, yeah. That's a bad reason. The question is, well, you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. I'm hoping that some changes happen to the law that make this a fluid transition to when there's definitely players that should be prosecuted. There are problems in the space that should be prosecuted. I don't think being a DAO is one of those problems, but I think various forms of fraud that go on are a problem where it would be welcome to have some oversight from governments to help reduce the fraud, to make it a safer place for buyers, that kind of stuff. I don't think all regulation is inherently evil, in other words.
No, you and I are on the same board as that. I don't think all regulation is evil, but the type that hinders innovations is the one I'm against. So 100% agree with you there. Now, while we're talking about law stuff, Opensea recently got a lawsuit because I don't know too much of the details, but I know you do. And I'd love to, you did a Twitter thread on it, and all his information, by the way, will be in the description. So make sure to follow him and, check out all the stuff he tweets. But you did a Twitter thread
Hearsay _law.
Yes,
Twitter.
Twitter, yes, sir. And you, so you kind of broke down what's going on with the lawsuit, and I kind of wanted you to maybe give us a brief oversight of what your thoughts are when it comes to that whole Opensea situation, and maybe give us a brief on it.
Okay, so there is a case called, is it McKimmey versus Opensea? Okay. Which was just filed about a week ago. And I did a Twitter thread where I decided to just let's read the complaint together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And reacted to it and shared my thoughts as I went. Now, when I started writing the thread, I actually thought that this complaint was about a slightly different situation on Opensea than it turned out to be about. I thought that this was about, I'm guessing most of your audience knows that we've recently had a couple of different Opensea stories, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that it was going to be about the most recent one, but it turns out the complaint is alleging something slightly different. So this is not seemingly the
phishing scam that happened recently.
Yeah, I don't even know that I want to call it phishing scam or not, because I'm not. I understand that that seems to be the consensus, but I don't know from a technical standpoint where the dust has settled on that.
Makes sense.
But there's that recent episode. This is saying something different. This is basically just saying, or what this lawsuit is saying. First of all, it happened before that phishing scam. I'm going to call it phishing scam, but every time I do, in your own mind, insert alleged if it makes everyone feel more comfortable. So apparently, this individual, McKinney, is it McKinney or McKinney? I might
McKinsey, I think.
McKinsey, okay.
Yeah.
Is alleging that Opensea essentially acted negligently, failed to implement certain security protocols that they should have implemented. It's not spelled out very specifically what those would be in the complaint, but that failure resulted in this individual having their Bored Ape. They have a Bored Ape that sold for something, a very tiny amount, and through no action, allegedly, of the plaintiff, sold at some tiny amount for an ape, and then got sold to another party at still a discount. I think the numbers are something like it sold for 0.1, and then resold, and then the thief sold it for 99 ETH, but that's still below the market for what this ape was, I guess, according to the complaint. There were a lot of things about the complaint. I wasn't that particularly thrilled by how the complaint was drafted itself. You probably picked that up from my thread.
Yeah. But
I was pretty gentle on them in my reading of it, because basically that's all they say. So what I just told you is what all they say. It's a 7-page complaint. That's all that's happened in the case so far, by the way, the filing of the complaint. Typically, the defendant's going to have 30 days to respond, and they might get more time. They may ask for additional time. But I'll follow it. We'll see what happens next with it. But I was surprised, for example, that there was no attempt to argue some form of strict product liability. There was no, the product being Opensea.
Yeah.
There was no attempt to argue. They argued breach of fiduciary duty, and that theory to me seems difficult in this scenario. Just general primer, we are, if you hire an attorney, the attorney is a fiduciary of yours. If you hire an accountant, there's various fields in which the individual, a bank, for example, is a form of fiduciary to their customers. A fiduciary has certain heightened responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right? But there's no situation in which we are fiduciaries to the world, to the universe, where we're all fiduciaries of each other. And the problem I had with their breach of fiduciary duty theory, and this is just all my opinion, is that he is arguing that he had nothing to do with Opensea. I didn't do anything. They sold it, right? And so, if you didn't list it, if you didn't interact with them, I don't see how you can form a fiduciary relationship then. And the same problem happens with his breach of contract theory, because the plaintiff in the case, it shouldn't surprise you to know that a breach of contract case requires the existence of a contract, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a written contract. If you hop in a cab, nobody has cabs anymore, but let's pretend. You hop in a cab and you say, take me to 22nd Street, and the driver says, okay. That's a contract. It's a verbal contract. The terms of it are all kind of filled in by the context, right?
Yeah.
We understand that you are going to have to pay at the end, even though it wasn't mentioned. And we understand it's going to be metered in some way that's appropriate to the market based on what the taxi driver meters are. I'm using a very dated example. I'm sorry. But the point is there's still a contract. You can't really have a contract without, I never met them. I never interacted with them. They just stole my thing. So I thought that theory was pretty weak. And then I noticed that they didn't allege some form of conversion. Conversion is just a fancy way of saying theft, okay? But that would have seemed to be, that's one that you don't need a contract to allege somebody stole something from you, nor do you need a fiduciary relationship with the thief, right?
Yeah.
That would have been a logical tort, a logical claim I would have thought to have in the complaint, but there was no form of that. So I don't know. What's going on, it seems, and I concluded by saying it may well be that they wanted to get the complaint filed as quick as possible.
And that's what I got from your Twitter thread, right? That it felt rushed, which is why I also believed it was, like the complaint was against the alleged phishing scam that happened recently, right? Because it makes sense if it happened and maybe they lost the Bored Ape.
Yeah, but as it turns out, it wasn't about that, and so that then raises the question: well, why is this so rushed? And my guess that I threw out there was maybe we're about to see them filing for a TRO, a temporary restraining order. One of the things they are asking for in there is they want Opensea to prevent further sales of the ape. Of course, remember, NFTs, right? They can stop Opensea from selling the ape. They can't stop the market from a technical standpoint. They can't
Another
stop
marketplace. Yeah, they can't
another
stop.
marketplace or things like that. So, but they want Opensea to not do a sale on it, and one would think if that's a goal of yours, you better rush to court to get an order quick, because it could happen presumably at any moment. So maybe we're going to see them filing for a TRO. TRO you can get pretty quickly. You can notice it on like 24-hour notice, and just run into court, and then you'll have a hearing on a preliminary injunction a few weeks later. If they do that, I'll be very interested to see what they file there, because the one difference between, with a complaint, you're just making allegations, right? To get a restraining order, you do have to put evidence in front of the court. You do have to show proof of what you're alleging, and that is an interesting case from a proof standpoint. And I assume that one of the big problems that they're going to have is, do they know what actually happened here?
Yeah.
Remember that the presumption in the law, if you've got no idea, if you can't prove what happened, or that it's more likely than not that your theory is right, that's a defense verdict. It can't be, well, who knows what happened? Maybe they did something wrong. Maybe I did. That's not going to cut it. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm really curious to see if there's follow-up, and if that follow-up has something more to show for it.
I'd be very shocked if Bored Ape sales were halted on OpenSea. I think that'd be the biggest bullish indicator for every other marketplace.
They might just stop that one. I suspect if they got their TRO, it would just be to stop the sale of that particular.
Yeah.
But even then, you're not really doing much. I mean, they could just list it on.
There's multiple other exchanges, right? OpenSea just being the most commonly one used. So that's very interesting to see.
I was trying to figure out who is X2Y2. This is another marketplace that launched recently.
Yeah, they did an airdrop. Shout out to them. I appreciate that airdrop.
But I was trying to figure out, who are they, right?
Yeah.
Their website doesn't ttell you much. I heard from somebody in our community, they said, oh, it's a Chinese group. It's like, how do you know that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, because, in their Discord, the most informative people in there, when you ask questions, speak Chinese. It's like, okay, so this is such, Now, that's not very compelling as proof, right? But okay, interesting clue as to where they are generally. But it really highlights the point of, are you going to stop that marketplace from selling it?
Yeah.
We don't even know who they are, right?
Yeah.
It's not so easy. And this whole topic we led into with problems for legal problems for the future, in the future with NFTs and things like that. And this just highlights a big one. Like, what power do the courts really have over these things?
I think you answered it perfectly. We really are in a new planet, and we don't know what's really going to happen or what could potentially be there. Well, Hearsay, are there any last thoughts, anything you'd like to share, maybe anything about Punkscape or yourself? I've pretty much asked all the questions I needed. I really enjoyed this conversation, but any last thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, well, if folks are interested in Punkscapes, I got to do the plug a little bit.
Go ahead,
the
Matt.
seminal OG banner project. You can check them out at punkscape.xyz or on any of the marketplaces, Opensea like we talked about, or any of the others. And you can check out Gallery 27 also on punkscape.xyz. Gallery 27 is the project with generative art that we talked about. We've got a bunch of cool stuff coming, including in the very near future. We've got some changes happening this Friday, some stuff this Friday, meaning in just 2 days. And we have some stuff coming in just a few weeks. So it's an exciting time for the project right now, like right before we release stuff. Our focus is always on giving value to the user. I didn't mention, by the way, that when we were talking about Gallery 27, that half the proceeds of the auction go to the holder of the Punkscape.
See, now that I didn't know. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and you can see it all, like on the auction. You can see, I mean, one of the neat things about this is it's not a trust in Punkscape that to pay out the Punkscape holders. It's all on chain, and the contract. The money doesn't go to Punkscape. It goes to the contract and back out to the Punkscape holder. I'm pretty proud of our team for developing that whole process. It's not like there's a cookie cutter Solidity contract that'll do all that for you.
Yeah.
So check out punkscape.xyz and come join our Discord and say hi.
100%. Well, Hearsay, I had a lot of fun. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot as well, especially from the legal side. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching this podcast episode. All the information regarding Punkscape, Hearsay, down below. Make sure to give him a follow. Very informative guy. But thank you so much, everybody, for watching. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And next week, I will see you with another awesome podcast episode. Take care, everybody.